Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. This is New Vision's Cloud Labs series for community schools and other New York City DOE schools regarding Google Apps for Education. This is our first session, and we're going to discuss the basics of Google Apps for Education, and we're going to do an intro to Google Classroom. Again, thank you so much for joining us. My name is Caitlin Gregg, and I serve as the Operational Systems Integrator here at New Visions. I work mostly with administrators, principals, APs, school business managers, etc., helping you all to create better systems for your schools so you guys can run more efficiently and effectively.
And my name is Danita Morgan, and I serve as the Instructional Systems Integrator here at New Visions. And I work primarily with the teachers to support in the distribution and collection of student assignments, as well as assessing those assignments using a digital workflow so that you have easier access and can provide a rich feedback for your students.
Just so you all know, this is being recorded and it will be available on YouTube after our broadcast. So we'll be sure to get all those links out to you all if anyone needs them. During the session, you'll have an opportunity to see a brief demo of the Google Admin Console as well as Google Classroom. This is an hour-long session, and we understand that you will have questions. So we're going to save some time at the end to collect and discuss questions if there are any. Right now, we're just going to get started. So we're going to share with you our the PowerPoint that we've made. So hold on one second.
Take you over there.
So like we said, this is our first session, and it is Why Go Google. If you see on our first screen, on our first page, you'll see a short URL for the presentation today. So if you ever want to reference this, you can go to bit.ly/GAFE session 1. So why Google Apps? Cloud computing, or having secure access to all your applications and data from any network device, offers accessibility, compatibility, modularity, and most importantly, security.
And using a Google Apps platform, what you're allowing your students to do is have unlimited access to an online storage facility. So instead of students saving all of their documents, or instead of you saving your documents onto a device or a computer, you can now save it into what's called your Google Drive, and you have unlimited storage in doing so. Also, using Google Apps for Education is free for your schools. The only thing that you need to pay for is to have access to your actual domain. So once you pay for the domain of your school, and you'll be learning more about that later, you can then add Google Apps for Education for free, and you have access to all of this.
Yes, so like Danita said, this is all free. There's a short application process that you go through with Google just so that they can verify that you're actually from a school when you're starting to set up your domain, if that hasn't been done already. But once you do that, there's like we said, it's more or less like a domain rental fee. So you're kind of renting the domain that you're working on, and you pay a small fee each year. It doesn't go to Google. It goes to the domain service provider, who kind of owns all of these domains. But that, again, that is something that we will go over later. But to get back to cloud computing is so important and integral just because of what we were talking about before, this modularity and this auto-saving process. So if you are used to working with students, let's say in Microsoft Word, so when they're in a Word doc or they're in Excel, anytime a student makes this change, they must remember to save something. If their computer crashes or the battery loses power on their laptop and the device goes dead, they're losing any material that hasn't been saved by them, and they have to make the conscious effort to save that material. When you're working in the Google Apps suite, that is no longer an issue. Whenever students are going through and working on something, same for teachers, administrators, etc., anything they're working on is auto-saved as they're working on it. Google also has this great feature called revision history, where you can go back and look at different versions of the same document that you've been working on, and you can choose to revert to an earlier version if, for example, you're working on something, you type 3 paragraphs and then realize that this isn't what you wanted to do. You can just go back into a revision history and save an earlier version of what you were, go back and save to an earlier version you were working on. And again, this is something that we will go over later in much more detail, but just to give you an idea of kind of the high points of why Google is so great. So when GAFE is used to its potential, school administrators rarely hear, where do I go to find my team's curriculum maps? How do I request supplies? How do I reserve a laptop cart? These are all questions that can be solved using Google Apps for Education. The administrative benefits are many. These are just a few, but everything is centrally managed. It is very simple to set up and maintain a domain. And at the end of our session, we'll actually go over some dates and times when you all can either come into New Visions or go to Google and set up your domain if you have not already, done so. It's also easy to add, remove, and suspend individual accounts, either individually or through a bulk process in Google. Admin can also create multiple aliases for a single school's domain. That's almost like giving your school's domain a nickname, and again, that's something we'll go over later. There's also this advanced security and this ease of use. Google provides advanced user support, especially if you're working on a Google Apps for Education domain. I'll show you when we take a look at the admin console. There's a 1-800 number that you can call at any time, and Google is available to help you with any questions you may have. They get back to you very quickly, either over phone or through email, and they're extremely responsive. We also provide you all with a few security tips. New Visions does what is called a domain security audit for all of our affinity schools. And we've actually created a template specifically for non-New Vision schools that you all can make a copy of and go through yourselves and make sure that your security is up to date with your domain. The administrative benefits also include device management, app use and management, and group creation. Device management is really key because you're able to set up and maintain Chromebooks within your school, especially with DOE schools, since we have contracts to get Chromebooks. You can more or less log and track these Chromebooks within your admin console, and it allows you to bulk add and remove features from the Chromebooks. So it's really, really easy to configure these for students, for administrators, for teachers, depending on who's using them. You can also manage your apps within the admin console. These are able to be managed either at larger group levels or an individual level, depending on what you're looking at. And this is something that we'll go over again in more detail in later sessions. You also have this group creation aspect. In a large sense, groups are really helpful for bulk emailing or sharing of files. So in the admin console, you can create and maintain these groups, and then you can use them if you ever need to email all your staff members. You don't need to remember everyone's email individually. If you ever are working on a curriculum doc, you don't have to remember every single science teacher's name. You can just share that document with science@yourschool.com. And again, this is something that we'll go over in a later session when we're talking about Google Drive. So right now I'm going to take a break from our PowerPoint and show you all what the admin console looks like. I've provided 2 slides within this slide deck to show you all what it should look like when you're accessing your admin console. Your admin console can be accessed 2 ways by a school administrator. It can either be accessed by going to admin.google.com, or from your GAFE email account, you click on the little 9-box grid in the top right-hand corner. And then if you click more, you see a little gear with a wrench, and that's your admin icon. So I'm going to show you all both ways to get to that. And if you're trying to access this later and you notice that you don't have access to the admin console, it means that you're not a super admin on Google. If this is the case, this is something that we can talk about how you can gain access to this. So right now, I am in my admin console, but I want to show you all how to get to it. So I'm in my email. And I am going to click on my grid, and then I'm going to click more. And right here, I see that it says admin. So these are all the different apps that I can access. I have my mail, my calendar, docs, contacts, etc. And now I can access admin by clicking on this little wrench. I can also access it by going to admin.google.com, and it takes me to my admin landing page. So when we're looking at let's close the multiple admin panels I have open, this is what your admin landing page should look like. So we see all these different icons that relate to different parts of the admin console. If you're ever looking for something and it seems like it's not on your landing page, what you want to do is click more controls. Occasionally, Google hides some of the admin privileges that it thinks you might not need access to. So you can always take them and drag them and drop them up here. You can also rearrange the way that these are set up. So if you think, for example, you don't need to see data migrations, you can just move it to the bottom and then you won't see it. You can also see a list of all the different admin console options by clicking on this little hamburger icon. You click on those 3 lines and it takes you to your list of all the different admin options. You have home, users, company profile, billing, apps, admin roles, groups, let's see, domain security support. So these are things that we'll go into detail in later sessions. But right now, I want us to take a look at the admin roles. So when you're a super admin, as you can see, that is kind of the highest level of access you can have within your GAFE domain. So there are multiple different types of admin roles. We have super, we have groups, we have user management, help desk, and then you can have these things called user created roles, which are unique admin roles that you can create at your school depending on a user's needs. But for our purposes, whoever has access to your domain should be a super admin. You want whoever is going to control all of the aspects of your school's domain to be able to have access to everything, which is why super admin is helpful. And as you can see on our test domain, we have numerous users who are super admin. And if we click on privileges, it shows us the privileges that they all have. And notice how all of these different things are checked because a super admin has access to everything on the domain. If you ever wanted to assign an admin, you click assign admin. You can add them here very easily. If you want to get rid of them, you click on assign admin and it's the same thing. If you notice for groups, however, if we look at their privileges, don't have access to all of those same privileges that the super admin did. So if you are a principal, if you are an AP, if you are a business manager, and most of your day-to-day work would involve you being in charge of your school's domain, you're probably going to need super admin rights, but that's something that your principal would ultimately decide. Let's see what else we can look at. Support is a really useful section of our admin console. So again, I clicked on my hamburger icon to get back to my main menu, and I'm going to support. So support is where it's showing me how I can get help. So phone supports is where it's very important. You have this 1877 number that Google provides that you can call and ask any questions related to your domain. When you do call, however, they ask that you click Get PIN just so that you can provide them with this PIN and it associates your domain that you're calling from with your kind of help ticket that they'll create on their end. Google also has great online support, and they have an Apps Administrator Help Center, which you can get to by clicking on this right from the admin console. Excuse me. That helps you with some kind of overview stuff for your Google Apps domain. And if you ever have a question, you can just type it into this help bar, just like you do when you go to google.com. Let's see, we're going to go look at one more section of the admin console, and then I'm going to hand this over to Danita so she can do a demo of Google Classroom. Another part of the admin console that's really useful is reports. So once you have your school up and running, you can get these detailed reports on usage of your domain. So you can see how many users have logged in, how many people are accessing Gmail, Drive, Calendar, how many users have been suspended or how many are active, how many apps are installed. This is this is a useful tool once you're up and running with your domain to kind of get a taste of how easily it's being adopted within your school. How many teachers are logging on? Are teachers creating documents? Are they sharing documents? Are there any security issues that you need to know about? So this is a very useful tool again. So we're going to go back to the home page right now. And I'm going to talk you through the next 2 slides really briefly. So we're going to jump back to our slideshow. So again, this is where you would access the admin console. So like I told you before, this is one of the services we provide at New Visions is a domain security audit. So we've provided you all with a template that you can access by clicking on this link in the slide deck. And you all can lead a self-paced security audit of your school's domain through the admin console. The audit is very, very useful. If we click on it right here, it's going to ask us to make a copy. And the first tab you're going to look at gives you a bunch of instructions and explanations. We have some color codings, and we have the URL to the admin console if you ever forget it. And then we have 2 tabs. One is an audit for secondary schools, and one is an audit for elementary schools. And by secondary schools, we're normally talking about 6 through 12. So if you click on the secondary school, it's giving us a bunch of different checkpoints. The status, findings, a link to this in the admin console, and then we have over here in column J an explanation. In our next, I believe it's our next Google Hangout, we'll be going into the domain audit more in depth. And we also provide you all with a, New Visions intranet template. So one of the funny things about using Google Drive is that once you start to really use Google to its full potential, when you're in Drive and you're creating documents and you're creating spreadsheets and you're sharing materials with other staff and students, especially when you're working with staff, it can become a bit, excuse me, hectic to try and find all the documents and spreadsheets and forms you're working on. So we suggest to our schools that are really using Google Apps for Education to its full potential, we suggest that schools create a staff intranet. And this is basically a private site, staff site where staff members know that they can access any and all staff-related information there. So we provide you all with a template for that here. And it's a great place for adding calendars and forms, anything you can think of that is online that teachers need access to day to day. This would be a great place to house them. And the intranet template provides you all with a few videos on how-tos, links to articles for how to create different kinds of things on the intranet. So right now I'm going to hand it over to Danita, who's going to talk about Classroom.
So thank you so much, Caitlin, for that. And just so you know, as Caitlin mentioned, you will be having more time where we'll be giving more sessions, both online and in person, to kind of support you and going more in depth with all of this. Now we're going to switch gears and move over to the instructional side. And prior to going into one of the features or one of the apps that you will have access to called Google Classroom, I kind of want to set the tone as to where most schools are now. And that's called using a paper-based workflow. So when you have a paper-based workflow as a teacher, the first thing you do is you have an idea. That's what the light bulb symbolizes. So you have an idea that you come up with for a lesson that you want to give to your students. Then you go and you gather resources, whether it be student-facing materials or resources for yourself. Then from there, you go over to what's called the copy machine, which in some schools can be very good. In some schools, it can be very challenging. I know from my personal experience working in a classroom, that was probably the most headache that I had throughout the school day. And from there, you would make copies to distribute to all of your students. So you give the copies to your students, they're working collaboratively or working independently on those assignments, then they hand it to you. Then in step 6, where you see an example of how happy you are as you're going through and hand grading each of those student assignments. After you finally are done grading all of the assignments, you then file them nice and neat into a filing cabinet or into a folder so that at any given point in the future, if you ever need to go back and reference those documents, you can also do that from that file. Now, more oftentimes than not, when I was in the classroom, this paper-based workflow seemed to have a lot of hardships and pain points, whether it be from step 4 to 5, where my students would receive an assignment, and then the process that it would take for me to receive an assignment back from them. Oftentimes, I was not able to give my students feedback or proper feedback until they had already completed the assignment. It was challenging for me as a teacher to give them that feedback throughout the writing process or the creation of their assignment. So once we go over to a digital workflow, it changes a bit. So now, as a teacher, you have an idea of what you want to do or whatever you want to assign for your students. And now you have this whole platform under Google Apps for Education where you have different apps that you have access to, be it a Google Calendar, a Google Form, Google Documents. You now have access to all of these digital tools that allows you to easily distribute assignments to your students through the click of one button. So that's what's happening in step 3. I have my assignment or my template, and I can easily distribute it to my students by clicking a button. Then in step 5, now this revision process is like a cycle. So throughout, because you're using Google Docs with students, you can see the development and the creation of student assignments in real time. So I can, at any given moment in my students' creation process, give comments to the work that they are doing. So I'm able to actually have an ongoing conversation with them throughout the creation of their process, of their assignment, instead of just at the end. Then from there, everything is stored right in their Google Drive, and that's what that symbol represents on the 4th spot. That represents their Google Drive, similar to like a hard drive, but it's saved digitally. So they took away the hard and they just made a drive. So it makes it much easier for us. So that's where they will be saving all of their work. And again, they have unlimited storage in doing so, both for the students and the teachers alike. So when it's used to its potential, when we're using, and GAFE is like the shortened acronym for Google Apps for Education, when you're using this to its potential, teachers rarely hear that students cannot find an assignment that they were working on. Oftentimes when you're using a paper-based workflow, students lose their documents or lose their assignments in transit just from going home and back to school, especially when you have like a multi-day assignment or task that you want your students to complete. Also, students now will have access to the curriculum. They'll know what's assigned to them for homework because they have access to that not only when they're in school, but also when they're at home. And you don't have to worry about, and I believe that Caitlin mentioned this earlier, this whole notion of deleting your work by accident, that no longer exists because one, Google Apps for Education will save your assignment for you under an autosave feature. And also, if you do delete anything, you do have that revision history to go back to. And you also can see when your assignments are due. So these are some of the things. And also I want to mention that no matter which device a student is on, they will have access to their student created work because they don't have to worry about the different formatting issues that may take place in, for instance, like a Microsoft document versus Microsoft DocX and converting everything over. Now that you're in Google Apps for Education, everything is saved and you don't have to worry about those issues that take place. So now I'm just going to show you, this is basically highlighting all of that. One thing that we did not mention yet is this ease of collaboration. So I talked about being able to easily give comments to your students, but your students are also able to work and share with each other. Because when you're using Google Docs or even a Google slideshow, which is kind of like a PowerPoint, which you may know as a PowerPoint. They call it Google Slides. What you're able to do is your students can share their documents with any of their peers in the classroom. And in doing so, they can all work on the same assignment in real time. So if I'm asked to create a specific slide on a slideshow, another student can add a picture as I can add the words. We can see what's happening, and simultaneously we can add comments to the side and have an ongoing conversation, even if we're all at home. So this doesn't have to be done in person and face-to-face. We can actually create and collaborate from home, which is another very key feature of using this platform. As a teacher, I can also distribute what's called Google Forms, which allows me to ask my students a series of questions, and my students can interact and answer those questions. And all of those responses are saved in a Google spreadsheet. So kind of like a spreadsheet, as you know, but it's using Google, so it's saved in the cloud. So as a teacher, I have all of my student responses in one place. And oftentimes, a lot of teachers have expressed interest in using Google Forms for an exit ticket in their classroom. So you're easily capturing exactly what your students are walking away with, and you're able to use that data to prepare for your next lesson. So then you have Google Classroom, which is an app that sits on top of the Google Drive. And I'm going to be showing you a demo of exactly how to use Google Classroom with your students. So we'll go into that shortly. And lastly, I just want to cover this whole notion of being able to track the progress of your student work. So you'll be able to look through the revision history and see how their work develops over time. So all of these will be here and listed in this slide deck for you, so you can always refer back to it at any given time. What we're going to do now is we're going to go take a look at Google Classroom. So the way you would access Google Classroom is simply by going to classroom.google.com. So I'm going to start from the very beginning and show you how that's done. So you would go to classroom.google.com. Just like you go to admin.google.com, you would do the same thing for going to Classroom. Then as a teacher, all you need to do, Google tries to make everything very intuitive for its users. So if you want to add or create anything, you're going to click the plus sign in the top right corner. So here's my plus sign, and I have the option to either join or create a class. Now, for the purposes of this session, I'd like you to see a class that has already been created, so you can have a view from both the teacher perspective as well as the student's perspective. So we're going to go into a class that has already been created. If you wanted to create the class, it's as simple as clicking Create Class, giving your class a title. So I can call this Writing, and then you would give your class a section. And I would recommend, this is a question that often gets asked, should I make a separate class for all of my different periods? And I would recommend that you do so, because all of your classes will move at different paces. So once we click Create, the classroom has already been created. So it's just as simple as clicking this, and it makes it so easy for school-wide adoption because it's so easy for you to create. So you start by having what's called your stream right here, and this is where when your students receive assignments or announcements that you post, this is where that will live. Prior to me doing anything with my students as a teacher, what I want to be able to do first is I'm all about aesthetics. So I would like to select a theme and change my background photo, make sure everything's set for the first day when my students come in. Then I also have some resources that are pretty standard. So I would give my class a title. I would give a brief description. I would tell them what room we're in. And then I also have the option to add course materials. Now, this is a place where if you want to add like your syllabus for the first day of school, or you want to add like the actual rules and regulations of your classroom, the protocols that you're going to be following, this is where this can live right here. And in order for me, now that I'm doing a digital workflow, instead of me printing this out and handing it to all of my students and hoping that they send it home to their parents or whatever the case may be, I can go right here to my Google Drive, and I can actually find that assignment or find that document and then post it. I also have the option to attach. So if it's like a PDF file or a file that I've saved to my computer, I can also attach a file from there. And I also can post like a link, a hyperlink. You also have the option to post YouTube videos. That's what the symbol stands for. However, for this, I'm not sure that you want to do that unless you make a video of yourself, introducing yourself to your class. However you want to go about it, this is where you would have your materials, like your course materials, that will live there. That way, if you have a new student, they can still access those same materials. They'll all be here. Also, when you're using this platform in Google Classroom, I know a lot of us, we experience co-teaching now as a model. So if you have another teacher who you would like to have access to this as well, you simply would click Invite Teacher, and you can select a teacher to invite and click Next, and then that teacher will get an invitation to lead this class. And that's my good friend Danielle, so I just went ahead and invited her. So that's how you would go about doing that. So now on the back end as a teacher, I have everything set up for my students to enter my classroom. I have my initial materials, I have the title and the classroom information, and I also have a nice little background photo that symbolizes my classroom. So now how do we go about adding students? So Classroom has it's very simple. So there's 3 different tabs. The other tab is Students. So I would click Students. Now, there's two different ways you can go about adding students to your classroom. One way is by clicking invite. Once you click invite, you can manually select all of your students. I have these students here because I've recently, or these are my colleagues, I recently sent an email to them, so they popped up. However, if you're working with students and you have student accounts, you would have to manually type in all of your students' account information unless you have them saved in a group. So that's more manual work for the teacher on the back end. So I shy away from using this option. It's good to know that you have it. But for me, what I recommend and what I like doing with students is I have all my students come into my classroom at the same time and sit down. From there, they go to classroom.google.com, just like we did. They click the plus sign, just like we did. And instead of clicking create, they won't have that option. They will click join class. And all they need to do is enter this class code that lives right here. So you have the option as a teacher to reset the code, disable the code if it gets to the wrong people, whatever you need to do. But you have this option. And then if a student does not get into your classroom for whatever reason or has any troubleshooting issues, you know that the only reason they were unable to access that is because they're typing in the wrong code. So maybe they're typing in 3 in the capital letter L because they're reading this wrong. But either way, you can help them right there on the spot. And you will just see students start to add themselves and start to join your classroom. So you don't have to worry about doing anything on the front end. So that's how you go about adding your students. So now what I'm going to do is just show you a classroom that has already been created, just so you can see exactly what this looks like once your students do join. So we have 4 teachers who are working in this class. When I go to the Students tab, I have all of my students listed here that have added themselves to my classroom via the class code. Now, as a teacher, I have options. If I ever want to send an email to all of my students and I don't have a Google group set up for that, I can simply highlight this top button and this will activate all my students and select all of my students. And then I have multiple actions such as emailing all of those students or removing them or mute. And we'll talk about what mute is now. So for one, in real life, if we could do this, this would make our lives much easier as teachers if we could just point to a student and mute that student. Unfortunately, we can't. However, in Google Classroom, you can. So you have the option to allow your students to post and to make comments. And depending on where you want your students to be, you can do that. If not, you have the option to allow all of your students to only comment, or you can make it so that only you as a teacher can do so. So there may be times where not all of your students have earned the right to lose these privileges, but maybe Amy is posting something inappropriate to our classroom. So for Amy, I would highlight her name and click mute. And now Amy, she can still submit her work, but she won't be able to comment to other students. So that's your option in regard to muting that student. Then you have the Google Stream. So once I go back over to my Google Stream, hold on, let's give it 1 second. There we go. Go back to our Google Stream. As a teacher, I can create assignments. So this plus sign again, whenever I want to create anything, I click that plus sign. So when I click the plus sign, I can create an announcement, I can create an assignment or a question. So if I wanted to create an assignment, I would simply give my assignment a title, and I'm not going to send this out because I've already, this is something that has been used already with the class. And I also have the option to post this assignment in multiple classes. So if you do have it separated by period, but you want to make the assignment be available to all of those classes, you can simply highlight multiple classes and it will be saved there. And then you also have the option to actually select a document from your Google Drive. And I'm trying to find something I can add real quickly. So say I wanted to add this, I would have a Google Sheets and I can make it so that my students can view the file, they can edit, or I would make a copy for each student. So if I click make a copy for each student, every student will get their own copy of that document, which is like the same process as me handing out and distributing a paper assignment to every single student in my class, but I'm just doing it by clicking a button. So I can save that as a draft, exactly what I've been working on. If I'm not ready to assign it yet, you can save it as a draft, or you can assign it. So I've given this as an assignment to my students. So this is what you're seeing here on your teacher dashboard. This is what it will look like in the stream. And it will let you know how many students have completed the assignment and how many students have not completed the assignment. Once I click down and go one layer deeper, I can actually break it down by not done, and it shows me all of the students. I can easily go into their work. And there are some students who are not done, like Amy, who has no attachment. If there is no attachment there, that lets me know that Amy didn't even open the assignment. So it just increases this level of transparency as a teacher. You're able to see exactly what your students are doing. I can also actually go into an assignment and see what that student has done, just like you would be able to do when you're using Google Docs. So I can see when the last edit was made. I can also add a comment. So we've been speaking about this adding a comment feature. So once I click add a comment, I can actually highlight and say, hey, I noticed that you are using conjunctions. Keep up the good work, right? So then if I were to type this here and I click comment, now this student will be able, and this is throughout the process, not when they're completed the assignment, but as they're working on it, now Joseph can actually look at this assignment and respond to my post or resolve it. Like once he fixes whatever I need him, whatever I've asked him to change, he can click resolve. So that is how you can go directly to your student assignments, and you can actually interact with those assignments. You also have suggestion mode. Oftentimes in the beginning of the year, if your students are not yet used to responding to your comments and learning how to revise for themselves, you can show them just by, I can cross that out and it'll tell them delete, and he can decide to accept it or not accept it. So that's how you go about going into their assignments. And I can also see right from my desk that Amy and Candace have not opened the assignment yet. So I can check in as a teacher and let them know, hey, what's going on, and make sure that they're on task and they have everything they need to get it complete. I can also highlight exactly which students are done, and I can start grading those students. For Google Classroom, the grading feature allows you to come right over here and you can input a grade, and it's out of 100. That's how it works. We have created at New Visions some tools, like, I don't know if you've heard of it yet, but we'll be learning about this in the future, which is called Doctopus and Rubric, which allows you to embed and attach a rubric, which gives you like much rich and meaningful feedback to your students, to the student-facing material, so they're able to see what these grades actually mean. So you're allowed to give feedback without it being numerical, not limiting yourself to just numerical feedback. You also have the option to, after I've graded her assignment or after I've given comments, I can click return, and then now Aura would actually receive this assignment, and she would receive an email letting her know that it has been returned, so she can make corrections on that assignment. I want to briefly show you what it looks like when you're going through as a student going through this. So you were able to see as a teacher, which will show you what's done and what's not done. Now let's go over to the student version. So once as a student, as I told you, you would simply click join class. Okay, give me 1 second. Let me just make sure you're able to see. Yeah.
Just 1 more second.
Yep, we're just showing you. We want to get you to the right screen. There we go. So now that we're at this screen, you're able to see what it looks like when you join a class. So as a student, I have my option to go to my classes. I have no classes. This is my first class. So I would click join class. And then what I need to do is my teacher would have the class code projected on the board. So once I enter that class code in, I can then go right into it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to go and copy the class code so that I can join this class. So it's DK1B32, click join, and now I will have access to this class, and I will have access to all of the assignments. So I already see that I'm late. So say you have a student who's joining your school year late in the year, they still will have access to all of the assignments that were done in the past, as well as all of the resources that you've posted as a teacher. So they will still be able to keep track of exactly what has happened in their absence. So I can open the assignment that was distributed to the entire class. And once I open that assignment, first it's going to give me a little tour of exactly what I need to do. I can open this assignment. And the difference with having Google Classroom when you're using Google Docs with your students is that instead of them sharing their assignments with you, they can simply click Turn In. Once I click Turn In, after I'm done working on the assignment, automatically my teacher is notified that I have turned in the assignment. So instead of me sharing and the teacher getting an influx of emails, teachers can easily see. So it says that it's done, but it's done late. And believe it or not, students do not like that. They don't like seeing that late symbols. And it will, motivate your students to work in a timely manner. So what we're going to do now, that's how it looks as a student. What we're going to do now, and I also just want to tell you briefly that this is also connected to your students' calendar. So for Google Calendar, your students have access to that. So what we want to do is we're going to go back to the teacher-facing classroom. And again, I'm going to have to make sure that I'm sharing the appropriate screen with you. So hold on one second. Yep, so we're back now to our teacher view. And I just have to say again, thank you to Caitlin. She's been helping me navigate this as we're going through it. Teamwork, for sure. So now as a teacher, I can see that that student assignment has been completed. Now it changed from 20 to assignment. So that's what it looks like as a teacher. So it's, in a nutshell, that's kind of like the basic features of using Google Classroom. And we will also be going into how to expand your use of Google Classroom, because as it stands now, when you're distributing and receiving assignments for students, you're not able to distribute differentiated assignments. You're also unable to give or you're limited to the grading feature and functionality that lives here, which is simply numeric. So we will show you how Doctopus and Rubric aligns with this and allows you to do more with your Google Classroom.
Great. So we're going to jump back to our slide deck right now.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Danita, for demoing Google Classroom. It looks like so much fun.
Oh, yeah.
So we have a slide here just telling us a little bit more about what Danita just went through with Google Classroom. So we wanted to give you guys, before we finished, a brief overview of some of the other things that we're going to be delving into deeper in later Hangouts. The first one is, these are all part of Cloud Lab. Cloud Lab is the part of New Visions that Danita and I work in. And other members of our team are creating these, what are called add-ons, and they're more or less like apps for Google Docs or for Google Spreadsheets or for Google Forms. And they help us to kind of go beyond what Google is offering us and let us do more with our work, especially when it comes to students and teachers. So all of these add-ons that you're seeing here are all created with teachers and students and the DOE in mind.
So for the first add-on, if you're interested in creating student accounts for your students, this add-on would actually allow you, especially if you're in New York City, this is primarily for New York City schools, but what this add-on will do is it'll allow you to create student accounts and provision those accounts, and it will also allow you to maintain the accounts. And the way it does that is it connects your students and their usernames to their OSIS number within your Google domain. So when you upload what's called an RBIR, which is basically like the database that it runs from, what it will do, this tool will actually connect the OSIS number with the student, and it can identify when a student no longer attends your school or is on your roster. So if a student has transferred out or they have graduated, what this tool will do is it'll identify those students and place them in the correct OU or organizational unit. And you'll be learning more about that in the future. But essentially, it's just a way that you can, Google allows you to create different settings and permissions for different users on your domain. So you can have an OU, which is for transferred students, and you can also have an OU for your active students. So what this tool will do is it'll take the students who are no longer active and place them in the inactive OU.
And if this all sounds crazy,
Yes.
don't worry. We're going into each one of these in depth in our, I believe, 4th and 5th sessions. So these are all of our kind of student-facing add-ons. And on the next slide, we have some more student-facing add-ons, but that are more for teachers and administrators. So Doctopus is this great tool that we will be explaining more in depth that more or less makes it easy to distribute and collect student work digitally very, very easily, and it helps us to differentiate those assignments. And Formula and Autocrat are two great kind of merge systems. So Formula helps us to send out mass emails through spreadsheets, and Autocrat helps us to kind of do mail merges in spreadsheets. And again, these are more add-ons that we'll go over more in depth. If you guys do want to learn more about this though, on the slide deck, if you click on each one of these, it will take you to the Cloud Lab site where these are located. And if you also click on Cloud Lab, it'll take you to see more of what we work on day to day.
And again, you have to, in order to have this be an active link for you, you need to make sure that you go to the slide deck directly and don't just click in the YouTube screen.
Yeah, and we'll provide you again with that information at the end. So to go back to this, so I'm sure that some of you may not have Google domains, and that's fine. If you guys don't already have a Google domain in place, please either see the New Visions Cloud Lab website page for setting up your school with a GAFE domain. We provide you with a lot of resources and walk you through what you need and what the steps are to take in order to get your own Google domain set up. Google Apps for EDU also has a great sign-up page, and they provide you with a lot of help there as well. You can also call this 844 number, and they will help you too. Please note that while Google Apps for EDU is free, like we spoke about earlier in the session, there is a $12 cost for renting your domain for your school. The fee is charged by ICANN, which is a third party, and not by Google. This is what happens for any website, not just school domains. Any sort of website, you have these what are called renting fees, and they're always going to be associated with your domains. But we strongly suggest that you purchase this through Google. The money won't go to Google, but if you do everything through Google, you will have a record of when your purchase was made, who you're renting your domain from, all of this information, which is very, very useful, especially if the person who's setting up your domain happens to leave your school. You want all of this information living in one place. And if you do it all through Google, you're keeping track of where everything is located, and you're never losing anything, because it's just a very, very important thing that we strongly recommend you do it through Google. And that being said, we're providing some drop-in dates both here at New Visions and through Google to help people get set up with their domains. So schools without domains should attend one of these first 3 sessions. One is before New Year's and 2 are in January. If you want to receive assistance in establishing your domains. The 2 New Visions drop-in dates also focus on assisting schools with domain security audits, which is that spreadsheet that we went through earlier. So this first drop-in date is actually next Tuesday at New Visions, which is at 320 West 13th. And we're located on the 6th floor. It's from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. The morning focuses on domain setup. So we would need you all to bring in a computer, and you need to make sure that you are a super admin for your domain. So like if you don't have a domain set up, just bring your computer. For the afternoon section that focuses on the domain audit, you should be a domain super admin in order to complete that. We suggest that SPOCs may attend one or both of these. It's also important to note that if you are setting up your domain for the first time, you will have to pay that $12 fee. So please bring some sort of a debit or credit card, because you're going to have to do that in order to have the domain set up. And we'll be here. It's basically, we're going to sit with you all while you go through this process yourself. And if you have any questions or concerns or you get stuck, both Danita and I will be there to help you.
And just to be clear, these are drop-in dates, so it's not necessarily that you would need to be here from the entire time of 9 to 5, but In the morning, if you don't have a domain, you should come in. And if you already do have a domain, you should come in the afternoon. That way we can help you make sure your domain is aligned to the best security practices.
Yeah. And we just provided you all on this next slide with the remaining Hangout on Air dates. The next one isn't until the end of January, and that's going to focus on that domain audit overview that we introduced earlier. And then the following 3 focus on really kind of the nuts and bolts of Google Apps. So we're going to talk about Google Apps Drive sharing in our 3rd session. And the 4th and 5th sessions are going to focus on those Google add-ons that we spoke about previously so that you can get your student accounts up and running and then kind of extend the power of GAFE with those add-ons that we were talking about. Excuse me. And if you all want to RSVP, click on the link within the link within your PowerPoint, or your Google slide, the slide deck that we're going to provide you, where it says click here, or you can reach out to your community school contact and they can provide you with a 1-pager that has the RSVP links there.
And I just want to highlight that if any of this sounds like a bit overwhelming at first glance, just know that if you were to attend all of these sessions or come to the drop-in here at New Visions, you will be in a much better place in regard to your understanding of how to run this and also how to use this for your school. So I think it may be worthwhile to just show you what that bit.ly link is again, just so that you know exactly how to go about doing that. So
we're going to go back to the top of our slide, and it's going to show you where that link is so you all can take it down. It's at the bottom. It's bit.ly/GAFE session 1.
So we'll give you a couple seconds to jot that down. And
also, we know that you all might have some questions. We went over a lot of information. Right now, our chat feature is disabled on the Hangout on Air, and we're working to have that fixed for our upcoming sessions. But in the interim, if you all have any questions about anything that we've gone over today, please email your community school representative with the questions, and we'll get them, and we will add slides to the end of this presentation answering all of your questions. Okay, so again, any questions at all, please just reach out to your New Visions rep, and we'll be sure to get back to you with those answers once we have them, okay? Thank you so much for listening. Again, thank you so much for listening. We hope to see some or all of you next week during our drop-in, and if not, have a good New Year, and we'll see you in January for our second Hangout.
All right, see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.